It's very important that you stop thinking in separate grips and start seeing how patterns are actually variations of the same chord. You might wonder, why is that important? But if you think about how you want to sound when you're playing chords, then you can hear that there's a lot happening, but the song only has one chord symbol. And when you play like that, you should not be thinking C7, C7 13, C7, C7 9, C7 13. Because that's way too complicated. You should just think C7 and a melody. So how do you go about this? You probably already know a lot of chords, but let's just start really simple and then build it up. Here's a C7 shell voicing. You probably also know this C7 and this C7 13. For this video, I'm going to focus on comping in a band with a bass player, so there's no need to play the root note, and then we have these three voicings. This might seem like magic, but really I'm just taking three chords that you already know, removing the bass note, and then putting them next to each other. Now we have three different ways to play C7, and we can use those to make some melodies. One way to work with this is that you can think about these three-note melodies as short blues phrases, because that makes it easier to come up with something to play, and it also helps you think of it as a conversation using call response. There are a few other things that really levels up your playing, going from just playing the chords to actually playing jazz, and I'm going to cover that, but you first want to just add a few more of the voicings that you probably already know to get a complete overview of everything that's available in this area of the neck. In the end, you can eventually play melodies harmonized entirely with just a C7. I started with a basic shell voicing and some drop 3 voicings, and then reduced that to 2 and 3 note voicings. But you probably also know some basic drop 2 voicings, and you want to connect those to the mix as well. I think the first, most basic candidate that you want to get in there would be this one. And you can easily create some variations from this voicing, either using what you already know about drop 2 voicings, or just by adding notes that are close to the voicing on the neck. That can give you a lot of options, but here's a set of practical ones. The C7, then we're adding the 13th, C7 9, or both 13 and 9, and finally this 13th where I'm doubling the third. If you add this to the material that you already have, then we have an entire octave where we can choose melody notes from the low E to the high E. This is way more notes that you need when you're comping, unless it's a never-ending C7 chord, but it's great to have an overview and to be able to play whatever you want. Notice that I'm skipping the F as a melody note. Now you can use it, but then you change the chord to a C7 sus4, so for now I'm just leaving that one out. Using all this material, then you can play something like this. With all these variations, I'm still just thinking C7, so you can of course stop and take one of the voicings out and then look at it and say, well, that's a C7 13 or a C7 9, but they're all usable when the song says C7, and you want to just think that one chord and then just have all these options to create your own sound and tell your own story with the harmony. Now we can add some tricks to the chords and get some blues and some chromatic dissonance in there. Legato is not the first thing you think about when you think about playing chords, but it's actually a great technique that you can use for some really amazing things. And this goes both for hammer-on pull-off and slides. And I think what you want to keep in mind with this is that you can of course pick the notes, but at the same time you get a different sound if you use legato, and you can take advantage of that. I'm sure you can hear how it sounds different, and there are a lot of things to be discovered with that. The chord type with the most options is probably the dominant chord, like the C7 that you're seeing me work with in this video. And that's also because you can easily add blues to that sound, but you want to explore this for the other chords as well, because there's a lot of stuff that you can unlock in that way. Now, if you combine this with some chromatic leading notes, then you get something like this. As you can hear, I'm adding a complete passing chord here and creating this nice bluesy slide into the C7. And I'm also using legato to add a chromatic melody on top of the chord, moving from the 13th down to the 5th. I think it's also nice how the first part is really stating the basic chord sound in a bluesy way, and then the chromatic phrase is sort of adding some sophistication later on. Another bluesy example that you can also get to work on something that actually isn't a blues would be this legato move. Here you have a hammer on to approach the third, and that's a very typical blues melody, of course. The chromatic phrase that takes the ninth down to the root is also turned into a melody that's just played on top of the sustained chord, which is another way of creating movement within the chords. You can create so many beautiful things with this. Let's get that sus4 sound in there as well, because of course that works as well. As you can see, it's not only voicings and notes that you have to learn. There are other things that you want to focus on that are a little bit less obvious, but that doesn't mean that you can't improve them. If you want to dig deeper into this, you can check out this video that covers a lot of important topics for comping, and you want to fix this. Otherwise, you're going to get fired.